Hey there Cadillac fans, today I've got another short video on how to change your tires. I know that sounds like a pretty simple task for some of you, but there are people that haven't done it yet and I think you should know how. Now, why would you want to even change your tire? Well, of course, if you get a flat on the side of the road, you'd want to be able to do that. But a lot of cars these days, including the old V Sport here, we don't even have a spare tire, so you're probably just going to get towed. But there are other reasons to take the wheels off. Maybe you want to take the wheels off to do an extensive cleaning of the wheel itself. It's nice to get in there every now and then and get it really clean. Or maybe you need to do service to your brakes, or you want to install that rear sway bar like I showed you how in my other video. Another reason you might want to take the wheels off is to switch over from summer to winter wheels and vice versa. Or maybe you've got some drag radials or drag slicks you want to use at the drag strip, or some good track tires. Today I'm going to show you how to swap out the stock wheel for my aftermarket one with the track tires. It's pretty easy, just follow along and you'll have it in no time.
For this installation, you'll need the following tools. I always recommend gloves, of course, to keep your hands clean and to protect your fingers. You'll want maybe some type of breaker bar like this for stubborn lug nuts. If not, you can just use a regular tire iron with a little extra strength. Don't forget, it has to have the socket type that fits your lug nuts. If you're going to be using a torque wrench, you'll need another socket as well. This is a 7/8, it fits the CTS lug nuts. And if you have wheel locks, don't forget your wheel lock key. If you have aftermarket wheels, you may also need different types of lugs, like this one. This lug nut is a spline type and takes an adapter to put it on. You may also have additional wheel locks, so have the keys for that. An impact wrench is a really great thing to have, and of course, don't forget your torque wrench.
Now, if this is your first time doing this, you probably don't have the helpful tools like this impact wrench. Impact wrenches are either air-powered or electric, like in a drill form. But if you don't have them, it's okay. It's just a little bit more work. In that case, you just want to use a tire iron. It has kind of a plus shape so that you can turn on these lug nuts. It's pretty universal. This one's from tires.com and there's many different forms available. Just make sure that it has an end with the correct socket for your lug nuts. Now, you don't want to raise the car up quite yet. You want to loosen these because they're on there really tight. And if you raise the car and you try to loosen them, the wheel's just going to spin. Here on the back tire, it might not because we do have the emergency brake on, but if you're doing it on the front, you definitely got to do it while it's on the ground. So let me show you how that's done. You just take your socket and you put it on your lug nut like this, and they're on there pretty tight. So you just got to put some force on it and break it loose. And you just want to do that to all 5. And then this one right here is a little different. This is a wheel lock. Now, not all cars have wheel locks, but if you do, you'll have a wheel lock key like this one. And it fits in just in one specific, there it is, just like that. And then you can unlock it like so. All right, the next step is we're gonna raise up the car and then we're gonna pull these lug nuts off completely so we can get the wheel off.
Be sure to check out my other video on how to properly raise and support your CTS or ATS without damaging the vehicle.
Today I used the method of jacking up the front of the car, and this got the rear of the car off the ground as well, and now I can put a jack stand under here for safety reasons. So now that the lug nuts are all loose, we just need to pull them off completely. And that's where this tool comes in handy. So you can just spin the tool like this, and it makes it really easy to get these lug nuts off. And then you'll need your wheel lock key, and then you can do the wheel lock. Notice how the tire's starting to tilt. It's just about the weight distribution, so it's okay. It'll tilt like that, but it should still hang on the lug studs. Now you want to pick it up and take it off of the studs that are poking out through the wheel. Now the wheel can be kind of heavy. In this case, this one's about 50 pounds, so be prepared for the weight. It may be helpful to get down on the ground and use your feet like this and lift with your feet and toes and then you can get it on the ground like that. Then just take it and get it out of the way. So what if you have one of these cool impact wrenches or an electric one? Well, they're so powerful and quick that you can just raise the vehicle off the ground and these will pull the lug nuts off without causing the wheel to spin. So just raise your vehicle and then set this to reverse. Make sure it's on reverse. You don't want to go the wrong way and over tighten the lug nuts. So that is a righty-tighty. So we want to go a lefty-loosey. I'm going to change the setting. And I'm going to make sure it's powerful enough to break free the lug nuts. That's not going to do it, so that's going to do it. And then you just put it on there, and they come right off. Now, it's not always recommended to use an impact wrench on a wheel lock. It can be damaged, but if you keep the power down a little bit, it'll probably be fine, but don't do it. But I'm gonna do it anyway because, well, it's my car and if I ruin it, I'm okay with it. And it comes off just like that. Now that you have the wheel off, this is a great time to inspect underneath the car and make sure everything looks pretty good. You can look at your brake lines and make sure there's no leaks there. You can go up here and look at your strut and make sure there isn't any leaking going on there. Actually, now that I see this, it's very possible that I've got a little bit of a leak right there in that area. I'm probably gonna have to change these struts soon. And then underneath, make sure all nuts and bolts are tightened. And here you can see all the rubber from my burnouts. All right, now that we've got the wheel off and we've inspected, it's time to put on the new wheel. Now this wheel is a little bigger. It's a 19-inch rather than 18-inch, but it fits just the same. Now take a look at your studs here. Notice how they're oriented. This one's about the 1 o'clock position, so I'm gonna adjust my wheel so that one of my lug holes is also in about the 1 o'clock position. It'll be easier to get it on. Again, it's kind of heavy, so get yourself set up like this, and you can kind of put the wheel up on one foot, the wheel on another foot, and then work it in. Your legs are a lot stronger than your arms. But if you're strong enough to use your arms, go ahead. And then once that's in place, you'll see it pretty much stays. Just depends on the wheel. So now we're gonna put our lug nuts right on in to all the lug studs. You can't use the old ones on my aftermarket wheel because the holes are smaller. So in this case, we have these much smaller, narrower spline lug nuts. These fit in and it's actually still a pretty tight fit. So first, always go by hand. Get that started by hand and make sure it's turning smoothly. If it doesn't turn smoothly, it means it's hanging up and crossing the threads that are in there, and then you're gonna start ruining things. So make sure there isn't any resistance. There can be some resistance if the wheel's kind of cocked off to the side a little bit. So just make sure it's nice and centered and fully flush up against the hub. The wheel lock on this one looks a little different as well. And here's my last one. Now you want to get these in there kind of snug. So we're going to go ahead and use our tire iron, and these lug nuts are 21 millimeter, but actually they're not 21 millimeter. This is, and this is a key that fits on these spline type lug nuts. You'll need that if that's the type of lug nuts that your aftermarket wheels have. So get it on there. And again, it can be a bit of a tight fit in there, but it does fit. And then just get them somewhat snugged in there. And as you move from the first to the second one, always move in a star pattern. So here's number one. We have the choice of either going here to the lock or to this one. I'm gonna go ahead and go to this one, and then we'll just go opposites from there. If you have an impact wrench, you can do this with the impact wrench, but you have to make sure you're on a super low torque setting. The wheel lock key on this lug nut requires a totally different socket. So in this case, I'm using this 1-inch socket to go over this key, and then it fits onto the lock. Turn it until you find the lock alignment, and then spin it on. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get these extra snug. So I'll go 1. I'll switch out to my other socket and spline key. I'm gonna go across, remember the star pattern? And I'm gonna get it snug. Just kind of snap it in there. Snug. And then here. So those are snug. And now it's time to lower the wheel to the ground. It's important to only lower the wheel just until it touches, and then it's not going to turn when you try to torque these lug nuts down. You don't want to put the full weight of the car on there, otherwise it could off-center the wheel depending on the design of the wheel and the hub. So let's lower the wheel down to just touching the ground and we'll torque them on. Okay, now that the wheel is just touching the ground, it's not going to turn. Now we need to torque these down to the proper torque specs for the vehicle. On my car, I use 110 foot-pounds of torque. You can check your manual for the proper torque for your wheels, especially the stock wheels. Be careful, there are actually 2 different torque settings depending on if your lug nuts are blue like this or they're just straight silver. So be sure to check that out. Now on the torque wrench here, we have a set of markings to show you what torque setting you're going to use. This torque wrench is pretty simple, and you first loosen up this black knob here and then you twist, and what we have here is like a 0 on this collar and then markings here on the side. So there's a 90 you can probably see, 110, 130. So we're going to twist this until the 0 lines up and the collar has gone up to the 110 mark. All right. Then we tighten this down and it's snug. All right, now that we have the torque setting down on the wrench, we want to tighten these lug nuts. I also like to put a little extension here on my torque wrench so that there's some distance from the wheel and the wrench. So when I'm doing this, I don't scratch the wheel. Then I'll put the socket on that fits on the spline attachment. And then just press down. That click sound is the sound of the torque wrench telling you that you've reached 110 foot-pounds, and that's when you should stop. Now, some of these may be looser and some of them may be tighter, but we'll get them all to 110 foot-pounds. Again, I'm going across because we're going to do the star pattern. Now I have to switch over to my key, like that. And there we go. Okay, one more check, and now we're gonna double check all of our lug nuts. It's important to do that because it may settle a little bit as you tighten each one. So again, star pattern. That one's good, that one's good, that one's good, that one's good. Now you may be thinking, well, why didn't you just use the impact wrench? It'll torque it down. Well, you're right, but we can't control the exact torque with this, and it could over torque them, and that's really bad because it'll stress the lug studs, and someday they may crack and fall off. Believe me, I've seen it happen. So always use a good torque wrench. This one's pretty cheap, so you should either replace it quite often if it's cheap like this, or get a really good one and have it calibrated often so you're always at least getting a correct torque setting. All right, now that the lug nuts are all on, we can lower the car all the way, and we're done.
And now for a quick review. First, loosen your lug nuts. Then, safely raise the vehicle and put it on jack stands. Next, spin off the lug nuts completely. Remove your wheel. Do what you need to do and then put your wheel back on. Start your lug nuts by hand, and then tighten them moderately with a wrench. Always use the star pattern. Lower the wheel so the wheel is just barely touching the ground, and torque down all lug nuts using the star pattern. After that, lower the vehicle to the ground and you'll be done.
All right, now that we've got the car on the ground, it's important to go take it for a test drive and listen for any sounds or clunks that you might hear, indicating that these aren't tight or the wheel's not fully sitting flush on the hub. Usually that's not gonna happen, but you definitely wanna test it out before just heading out on a road trip or something. And then after about 75 miles or so, I do recommend double checking the torque on all the lug nuts and make sure they're still right where they need to be. So that's it for changing a tire. Be sure to check out my other video on jacking up your CTS and ATS so that you can access these wheels in the easiest possible way. Otherwise, if you have any comments or suggestions on doing this different, please let me know in the comments section below. I always love your subscriptions. It really helps me out. Please do. And of course, hit the bell for notifications for when the next great video comes out here on the Jet Fuel Only channel. We'll see you next time.